Jacob always felt like he was being watched when he was in public. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following him and knew his every move. He'd hear strange noises, see shadows in the corner of his eye, and he even started seeing the same strangers everywhere he went. He didn't have any enemies that he knew of. He was a friendly person but not popular at all. Jacob had no idea what was going on, but he knew it wasn't normal. When he pulled into a parking space or sat away from others, he felt like someone was always going to appear out of nowhere. Jacob began to think he was a magnet for people, but not in a good way. It amused him sometimes when he entered a store that was rather slow and suddenly more and more people started coming in. It annoyed him when there was no line for checkout until he had just finished his shopping. He was the type of person who liked to be alone, so he stayed low-key. He would avoid conversations and tried to hurry and run his errands. He noticed that he had periods of time where he did not feel like he was being watched. It made him wonder if he had a mental issue. He started to look into what was happening, and that's when he discovered the term gang stalking. He finally felt like he wasn't insane or schizophrenic. However, that didn't make it easier for him to feel comfortable or safe when he started to experience it again. He hoped that he could just accept that this is just a phenomena, but it was not possible. Jacob feared going out in public for too long. He thought there might be a chance his safety could be at risk with how bad it was sometimes. It became progressively worse the more he thought of it. He found solace in the online community with others experiencing gang stalking. It was the only proof that there was nothing wrong with him and that this was very real. One day, Jacob was driving around on a highway when he noticed a car had been following him for longer than normal. He thought to himself, "This is great. What could they possibly want from me?" He tried to slow down and pull off to the side, but they weren't taking his lead and continued to stay behind him. He turned off of the highway exit and the car kept going. He was relieved that nothing happened and was beginning to relax. He pulled into a parking lot to check his phone and try to GPS a place to eat in the area, when a car pulled up behind him and blocked his car in. Jacob panicked. They finally got him and he feared what they planned to do with him. They got out of their car and were walking up to his car. What happened next he would have never expected. He accepted that they were going to rob him or hurt him. Instead, it turns out they stopped him to ask for directions. Their phones had no service and they were not from the area. He calmed himself. His heart had been beating out of his chest. He told himself he was not crazy and that he just had gotten lucky in those circumstances. He felt negative energy from some who gang stalked him. Others he considered to just be a nuisance, always inconveniencing him. He felt real fear and paranoia too often. Being in the state that he was in was no way to live. He never was a churchgoer, although he believed in God. He felt a nudge to go to church, although he didn't like the idea of being in a crowded space with strangers. It always had such positive energy and he desperately needed that at this time. So, he attended church on Sunday, and by coincidence or maybe a miracle the pastor spoke of spiritual warfare and how some might be gang stalked as means to monitor and weaken those of light. Now Jacob was so moved and overcome with emotion, but he doubted that he could possibly be a beacon of light. He barely prayed and still committed sin. However, what he could not take into account was his good heart, but God saw it. Unfortunately, that meant others did too. He lived his life being lonely because he constantly was taken advantage of. People craved his energy and presence, but he was unaware why. People with bad intentions also sensed his light and good heart and saw it as an opportunity. Now Jacob of course noticed when he was being gang stalked, but instead of being gripped by fear, he prayed. He stayed humble and kind, but he loosened up enough to let some good people in. He made friendships which he never